Hey there, my name is Jurri Schenck, and welcome to the Legends of the Wind podcast. I'm really excited to see you here today. My show is about helping you know what story you're in. I want to help you discover your identity and destiny through storytelling. Today's episode, we're going to listen to The Wisdom of the Trees. It's amazing because it's about a magical forest where people make wishes in a deep well. After the story, we will have a conversation with our guest to unpack the meanings in the legend. I wrote this legend for my friend Barbara Dumont because she asked me to write her a second story. The first story I wrote was a lot of fun and completely different than this one. But what was really cool about this second story is that when I gave it to her, she didn't really respond well to it. She didn't know how to receive it, but that's okay. What was fantastic is that this story was like a seed, and it wasn't until much later that it dawned on her its significance. She had to go on a journey of discovery of identity before she could see herself in her own story. I'm on a journey too. I want to discover who I am. And I want to take you with me on my journey. Will you join me? My heart in writing all these stories for people is for all of us to figure out who we are and where we are going. This is my journey too. And hey, let's face it, I don't have it all worked out. But through these stories, we can put the pieces together. So let me introduce you to the subject of our legend before we listen to it and unpack its hidden treasures. Today's guest is my good friend, Barbara Dumont. Barbara is an aspiring actress and co-creator of written works, plays, short films, and theater. She is a life coach and has counseled many who felt stuck, but she has successfully brought great shifts in their lives. She nearly died several times in 2016 through 2018 due to a kidney transplant need. And now with her new donor kidney, she has a new lease on life and is pursuing acting, which has been her dream for a long time. You can find her on Instagram at the Barbara Dumont. Her legend today is very special and describes her life in a unique way. Barbara, thank you for joining us today on Legends of the Wind.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you for coming. I'm so excited to share with the audience your legend and talk about it. Barbara's legend is a little different as it speaks to her identity. So, without any further delay, let's check out her legend, The Wisdom of the Trees. The Wisdom of the Trees. Long ago in the forest of love and wisdom were a series of trees in a circle that surrounded a deep well. Lovers and friends of the king would come out at night and seek the presence and fragrance of the trees as they made their wishes and dropped coins into the deep well. The stars always shined bright at night above this forest, and during the day the sunlight was shining and pleasant. Sometimes storms would come, but only a slight refreshing dew from heaven would glisten upon the green grass. This forest is ancient and full of experience and wisdom. There are many trees here that have thick trunks and branches. They grew over a long period and their roots are deep. They are the ancient ones. And inside this deep well are waters of life and refreshment. It is here that we meet the desires of the heart and love pours out like a fountain. The people would come and drop their coins, their heart's desires, and wish for better things in life, the eternal things. And the trees would listen to their words, for though the trees always stood around and no one seemed to notice them, they heard every word, saw every teardrop, and every broken heart that came their way. The trees loved the people and wanted to impart more things to them, but the waters of the well would speak to the people instead. The trees have been around since the beginning of time, and their roots serve the land, the earth, and their fruits drop during the right seasons to the people. Few of these people ever know the trees, for they take them for granted. But when the wind blows and there's a stirring in the atmosphere, the music coming from the rustle of leaves, it causes such a wonderful commotion that the people long for more from the heavens. It is the wisdom of the trees that carry the words from the well. They do not speak on their own accord, but draw upon the deep waters from within the earth. Sometimes the well overflows and spills out upon the land, and the people love it when that happens. But the trees long for more. They look at the people and hope that their fruits bring healing and life. The wisdom of the trees is to never draw attention to themselves, but to let fruit grow on their branches. Each tree is different and carries different fruits. They even have different smells, and their leaves are unique. There's no tree identical to the next one. Sometimes the people who come to visit the well in the forest sit under a tree and enjoy its shade and shadow. They even can fall asleep and rest in the quiet. It is here in these dreams, in the shadow of the trees, they speak. The trees enjoy this time, for here they can whisper their wisdom and love to the people. One morning at dawn, the people came and dropped their coins in the well, and the trees listened. But this was a new day, and the well's water overflowed upon the land. It was a huge flood and a wonderful party for the people. They splashed around and found such great fun. Life was looking a little better for the land, and the trees were in their fruit-bearing season. Here the people soaked in the waters of the well and rested under the trees. They dreamed and dreamed and dreamed some more. The wisdom of the trees came to them, and they heard the heart of the well coming from the roots of the trees. The trees were excited and shouted in their dreams that freedom was coming to the land. No longer would the earth shake so that their houses fell to the ground. No, the trees of the forest would bring great stability. Now watch and listen and find yourself at the well in this forest. Find yourself at rest and drink from the well. Drop your coins down, make a wish, and see and hear your dreams come true as you listen to the wisdom of the trees. Inceptio. The wisdom of the trees. So, Barbara, I wanted to start off with basically talking about how this story came to you, or came from me to you. Originally, I wrote this story as a second legend for you, correct? The first one was called Silly Walks and Silly Talks. And why don't you talk about how this started off?
Well, actually, Jurri had been inspired by something in my life and wrote that original first story. And I was so moved by it. I wanted another one. I was kind of addicted. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to straight out ask him. So I did. It's like, Jurri, hey, if you want, maybe write me another one. And this was like 10 years ago. So it was, I was in a really different place in my life, but like, you actually did. You ended up writing me this second story. And I remember my response kind of being,
Right. And you didn't think it was very significant at the time, did you?
I really didn't. I mean, I was like, I like trees, but
I never interviewed you. I never knew about your past or anything, right? So I completely wrote this blind, just like the other one, right? So now it's 10, 11 years later, and I was saying to you earlier that this story, this legend, is like a seed, right? And it grew into a tree. So why is it now touching your heart more today than it did back then? And why is this legend more significant now?
Well, I actually had a dream. I actually read it the other day. More detailed than but a dream about a couple of years ago where I became a tree. I was in kind of an ethereal, eternal space, and I had met my soulmate, and he and I walked together, and we found a spot, and we decided to become a tree because we wanted to remain in this space, in this place, in this environment. We loved it so much. We spent about 300 years together there, and
300 years.
I still, yeah.
Wow.
Which time doesn't really pass the same for a tree in the way that it does for you and I. As humans, every day and every hour in some cases has value and importance, and we don't want to see those things slip away. Our time span is far different, but with a tree, 300 is young, at least from how it felt in that dream. I really wasn't that old when my experience as a tree ended. But for a tree, the value of time comes in seasons and decades, and you could call it the rhythm and the pattern of creation and the way it behaves.
Mm-hmm.
So the things I remember still, without reading the dream, are an extreme drought that lasted, my guess in human perspective would be several years, where it really started to affect creatures. I remember a severe thunder and lightning storm where the
Wow.
rain really affected a lot of the creatures that don't live in the trees but live on the ground. And that was interesting, simply because I understood somehow as a tree that these creatures would be affected. Um, Even though I couldn't see and I couldn't hear, I could feel the vibrations in the earth and in the soil and upon my branches and along the trunk of my tree. I was aware of all of that. So I actually
Wow.
knew that as a tree, we were by the water
Okay.
because I could feel the constant pounding of the ocean against the shore, which was really it was calming in a way. It was steady and without failing. So I knew about this storm because I remember the upset of the water against the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the same time, my roots were aware of the sensation of creatures walking on the ground, and I could feel every once in a while creatures that would lean up against my bark or huddle close to me, and my trunk. And I was constantly aware of birds and branches, and bugs were nothing. Really, bugs didn't really bug me at all.
Wow.
Uh, I just was enjoying too much being in the environment, where the environment was a welcoming feeling. It wasn't this
Huh.
feeling of, oh, get off me, you're don't leave me alone. I never had that experience as a tree. It
And
was all
so, what's
pretty.
the big takeaway about this dream? This dream is fascinating, strange, but it's amazing at
Yes.
the same time. Like, so, what was the result for you in this?
The result is I slowed down. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and I lived in San Francisco for a number of years. And even when I lived in San Francisco, just that pacing difference between LA and San Fran was a huge adjustment. But this dream actually really enforced that and encouraged this different rate of existence where I didn't have to be bothered by my environment. I didn't have to be bothered by things around me. I could really rest within the soil of where I was
Hmm.
planted and allow myself to get gritty with it and immersed in it and not be bothered or offended or disturbed even by just things happening circumstantially. So even when I was dying, I had the dream in the midst of that, like kind of near the beginning,
Are you talking
where
about your
things started.
kidney issues?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you kind of briefly mentioned that. So
Right.
back in 2016, things started getting bad.
Okay.
But it happened very slowly. So I would say I probably had the dream in the middle or end of 2016.
Hmm.
And it was really helpful because I had to deal with multiple surgeries. I went into cardiac arrest.
Oh
I
my God.
had my life be threatened by forces that I couldn't control and that no one else could really control either.
Mm-hmm.
I was born with polycystic kidney disease, and pardon, it it was something that I knew would could potentially cause problems, but even with doing everything right, there were still problems,
Mm.
life-threatening issues.
Wow.
So the experience of being a tree and being able to take each moment at a time, but not let it be this overwhelming thing, and even finding the rhythm of nature and surroundings. And yeah, I could limit it to nature, but I think I found that rhythm even in the environment of people I was around.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually a scene in a film called Phenomenon with John Travolta, and he has this spoilers. He has a brain
Okay.
tumor. Okay.
He
And he
is
doesn't
what?
really know a brain tumor, and he
Okay.
doesn't really know yet. his mind is just working at such a rate. He has difficulty sleeping, calming down. If this sounds familiar to anybody, maybe you remember this scene where he looks up at a tree and it's just blowing in the wind. And it's this rhythm of nature and this rhythm of the way things really can be. We don't have to be in a tremendous upset. I mean, there was so much of an advantage for me when I was going to the hospital at least once a month, most of the time 2 weeks, 1 to 2
Mm.
weeks at a time. More than I can count, being
Wow.
under anesthesia and all kinds of IVs and medication. That being able to just breathe in the moment, it was a constant reminder that no matter what the result was going to be, this too was going to pass. And I chose to put my stock in the people that were visiting me, the people that were taking care to support me even when I wasn't in the hospital. And I mean, people were constantly amazed. How
Wow.
are you doing so well? How is this possible? You always seem happy and full of joy. And I know we hear this a lot with people that aren't well, but trust me, when this first started, I was not at peace. Was
Mm.
not happy. I had to kind of fall back on this experience in this dream, and oddly enough connecting back with this story,
Okay.
because the trees are connected in the roots, and the water that we are connected to
Mm-hmm.
and I was connected to in that season made all the difference.
Wow.
All the difference. Because the water was steadfast, it was constantly cool, it was available to me always.
Mm-hmm.
And it became kind of a joint experience, even though the waters in the well couldn't come to my hospital experience.
Mm.
They very much could be the things that I was drawing from, even when I was separate from them.
Mm.
And it was really, really great. Really, I mean, exactly that. The
Wow.
ability to breathe and take that breath.
So, what else in this legend? It's funny because when you had your health issues, you didn't really remember this legend, did you? And it was so long ago, but now with this dream and this experience, what else in this legend connects to you? In as a tree or as a stationary object or whatever, like how else can you unpack it for us today?
Well, actually, when I wasn't well, I didn't like the idea of not doing anything. I'm a human being, still alive, plenty to contribute. And this is actually where you could say the life coaching really started to be a thing in my life. It really
Mm.
wasn't before then. I mean, I've counseled my friends, I've constantly been there for people, and I've seen a lot of success in those interactions, but they weren't these constant or consistent experiences that I was having with everybody. And while I was immobile most of the time, I had people that were wanting to see me, usually friends, sometimes not as close as some, not as close as others. And they would come, and I ended up being kind of a source for them. I
Mm.
had fruit to offer. I
Ah.
had the benefit of being in these wells and the wisdom that just comes from drinking in healthy waters in the first place
Mm-hmm.
coming into me, so that my fruit, whenever I'd be speaking, it was a constant thing that I would hear from two people in particular, that I just had such wisdom coming out of me, and not being able to understand, somehow I would come across ancient. And I'd be like, "Hmm,
Wow.
I suppose that is kind of a thing right now." And I kind of see the beginning from what felt like at the time the end. And the perspective really shifted. A lot of
Wow.
people I know in that circumstance would say something to the effect of, "Well, you only live once, live today like it's your last." But I found that to have a really impactful experience, not just for myself, but for others,
Mm-hmm.
the perspective that was constantly around was, yeah, eternity.
Hmm.
And those that didn't even have an eternal perspective had a perspective that I wasn't going to succumb to the physical challenges that I was experiencing. I was going to remain. So what made every interaction that much more value was this, I know it's silly, but the legend talks about it. It's
Hmm.
the ancientness and the wisdom and hoping the fruit is good. But all that makes that work together and be profitable and be a benefit is being able to see that we're not limited to just today. So let's make some of our day and some of what we're saying be an investment into the future. And so I was able to make these investments into other people's future. Whether I was going to survive or not was never the issue. It was that I could plant something into someone else's future, that even if me in my stationary position, even identifying as a tree on some level, just hoping that the fruit is still being maintained and that it's wise, it's because people were pouring into me. And like I said, it felt like I was getting waters from a well and then producing this fruit for other people that would come. And we actually have tons of laughter. I'm sure I've got photos and videos of it. I definitely have videos of it where there's just plenty of laughter, plenty of enjoyment, plenty of delight, and plenty of moments where I couldn't do very much. I felt like I couldn't drop fruit, but even just me being present with them on some levels could be shade and minister to their soul. That if me, in the turmoil and the cyclone at times of the circumstance that I was in, could still find the rhythm of what it means to actually continue with a perspective that this rhythm doesn't end, I that there's nothing like that kind of shade. There's nothing like that kind of cool down that makes you forget the urgency of the pressure or the heat or the fire underneath your feet. You know what I mean? The people around me were able to rest on some level too. And wow, that was so cool. Because I have one person in particular, he's a writer, and he was having difficulty really, really connecting with the ideas in his heart and in his mind that he cultivated over time in his life, his own wisdom from feeling his own existence of being stationary, interestingly enough. And when we would get together, things were shifting and changing. He was eating fruit from me, getting wisdom from me. And after a brief period, I would say a year, he was starting to be able to write. Genuinely right, and it's good. It is really deep and excellent work, and it's his wisdom and everything that he was able to absorb and receive, you could say, from me. Even though I identify more as the tree, I think at some point when we're feeling stationary, all we have to give is fruit or water. And I don't know. It seems a little off topic from what I identified with, but I still think that that's really possible.
I think what you had to say is amazing, and I want to affirm you that you almost died so many times. I remember visiting you in the hospital, and you having horrible trials, and it seemed to be never ending. You were waiting for a donor, and we didn't even know if you'd ever get a donor, and yet you maintained this identity and the ability to see and to be able to speak into people's lives. I applaud you because you could have died.
Thank you.
And so, but you also talked about this gentleman that was a writer, and I find it fascinating. So, in a forest, there's more than one tree, right? And so what about this? Wouldn't everybody be a tree? Isn't that something special? Don't we all have some sort of fruit to offer?
Yeah, and I think we all have that possibility. And it's funny, I know that everyone's families look so different, and some families can cause pain and suffering, but some don't. And my family was small, and I don't think there would. My natural family is what I'm referring to.
Okay,
sure. My mother, my brother, my sister, that was kind of it.
Right.
And I wound up, just kind of foreseeing that things could get challenging with my health long before they did. I never expected this level of physical failure on my body's part to be able to sustain its own life.
Right.
But I did see the wisdom in just having people alongside me in life. And so I
Mm-hmm.
developed relationship with people. One person came out of the blue. So I started getting sick in July. I had only really met them, I think, in April, where we really kind of started to connect,
Okay.
of 2016. So
Uh-huh.
I I ended up with this other family around me, and those families can be well, they can be water, they can be
Mm.
life, and remaining connected in healthy relationship. I'm not talking about if your family's toxic. I'm talking about really healthy relationship.
Mm-hmm.
That really brought about me being able to produce good fruit.
Mm-hmm.
How could I do that if I'm putting myself in an environment that's a desert? Then
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to probably become a prickly cactus. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm probably not going to be a tree that provides shade. And I'm not saying there isn't a time and a place for a cactus. I mean, they are sources of life for the desert.
Sure.
I'm simply trying to make a point of, with this particular story,
Mm-hmm.
if we do choose to remain planted in a good well and have good, and it can be spiritual, it can be relational, it can be even your place of business where you're
Mm.
doing something you just love. Those things can be the well that you drink from and have
Mm-hmm.
all of this fruit for. And for me, it manifested in a lot of kind of timely, lifelong wisdom that
Wow.
made these people's lives even better and more connecting for them. But for anybody, it could end up meaning breakthrough at a company, and it could mean
Right.
healing in their own family eventually. I don't know.
Sure.
There's so many possibilities, I think, to that, but answering that question just makes my mind start popping and clicking.
Sure. And speaking of popping ideas, you had mentioned prior to our conversation tonight about you wrote a story or a paper when you were younger. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that was when it was before you met me and before I wrote this story. Can you talk about that as well?
Yes, because what's interesting, I think, about that writing is I, especially younger, and I've kind of, because of this story, have gone back to this habit.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I loved trees as a little girl. I would
Mm-hmm.
hold them, not like carry them around, but like I would hug them. I would climb them. I would look and follow the lines of where the branch would be going.
Oh
I
my
just
gosh.
love trees. I really do. I love trees a lot. And I hadn't considered that when you wrote the story. I was just like, great, a bunch of trees.
So you
And
didn't remember at that time.
um, I briefly thought I don't see the connection, but I did write something when I was younger. And
Okay.
what I'd written, and it was one of those like citywide competitions where they try and get the different grades to send in stuff, and it was for Arbor Day, and
Mm.
I um I won in my category through the city
Oh wow.
for fourth to sixth graders. And when the mayor talked to me, he said something like that actually they thought my poem was better than some of the other submissions that were
Wow.
in me as well. And it's actually super reminiscent of the book The Giving Tree. And it was the
Okay.
whole, it wasn't even like a rhyming poem. It was just, I love trees. I mean, they're constantly there for you. They never leave. They fruit for you. They provide shade for you. You can play in their branches. You can lean up against them when you're tired. You can sit under their shade and feel cooled. You can, so our homes are built from them, even though we talk about trying not to cut down trees. And I agree, we should honor and respect
Mm-hmm.
our environments. At the
Mm-hmm.
same time, there's so much that a tree is there for and provides for people. And I didn't know about the Giving Tree. I didn't actually read that book until I was much older, in my
Okay.
30s, actually. It was when I first read it.
Wow.
Um, and was stunned to see the similarities between this piece that I had written, having ever read the book, and the Giving Tree. So I think there's something that is universally understood about trees,
Oh
and
wow.
and to be like a tree, I think, is being like a mother, an excellent
Mm.
mother, being like a father, an
Mm-hmm.
excellent friend. That we as humans have this capability to not be limited to one type of giving. And if we ever
Wow.
feel stuck that we're in this place of only one way to give, maybe we need better water. Maybe we
Wow.
need to be absorbing from something deeper, something
Yes.
better. And sometimes people are insufficient. Sometimes what our beliefs are at that point are insufficient.
Mm-hmm.
Because even for me, I mean, I have my own beliefs, but my beliefs had to shift a little bit when I was dying.
Mm.
I had to
Mm-hmm.
be willing to take some risk and go
Right.
deeper in order for that water, that well. Yes, the people around me were great and amazing. You heard me
Right.
herald their support, but having the waters go deeper and having the waters be, there's just something about deep water
I like that.
that can
So,
be more satisfying, more
um,
pure.
so would you recommend anyone in the audience to receive their own story? Like, how has this legend impacted you on the deeper parts of your life? I mean, obviously, you talked a lot about the different aspects of trees in your past, but what is it about these legends that speak to you?
Well, it was the same thing with the second, even though it was surprisingly later, as it
Mm-hmm.
was with the first. And there was a sort of edification, a support somehow from creation, the universe, a spirit, like however you see it,
Mm-hmm.
that was like, yes, this is who you are, this is how you're made. Run with it. It was an encouragement for me to really run with these things that I've always felt inside of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And even going back and reading, what is this one called? Why do I always forget the name? I mix up Legend with the Wind with, what is mine called?
The first one was Silly Walks and Silly Talks,
Yeah, what was the second one?
The Wisdom of the Trees.
That's right. I always put the Legend of the Trees in my notebook, and so because I always write it wrong, I always say it wrong. I didn't want to get it wrong. I know we just said it, but I was gonna forget, and I knew it.
It's
Um,
okay.
but the but the Wisdom of the Trees, like, was super edifying during that season in my
Mm,
life, and it continues to be edifying. Even just doing this podcast right now, I'm
right.
like, oh yeah, yeah. I am by a good well. Maybe that's why my fruit's getting better again. You know
That's
what I mean?
amazing.
And there's there's I know that other people identify with this story, so please don't disqualify yourself.
Mm,
Like I said, when I first heard it, I was kind of like, that's nice. I mean, yeah, I like trees, but okay. But really and truly, if you identify, take it in. Let
mm.
what has been created edify you. And if it doesn't, get Jurri to write you one, to be honest. Like, that's what I did. I literally asked, was like, hey Jurri, you write these amazing stories and everyone's lives are changed,
Wow.
so write me one. And yeah, I already had one, but I wanted more.
It's
I
funny.
wanted more, and that's the truth. And these two stories are so vastly different, and they both edify really different parts about me, which is
Mm,
really incredible. So know that, like, these stories don't even have a repeat on them, even if there's some bleed over, because I would say they both kind of edify my ability to interact with people, but
right.
that's it.
Wow.
And um yeah, so if one story, I mean, truly, this man is gifted
Thank you.
to do a story that really frees us up from the kind of distractions and lies and junk that try to get us not to be who we are.
Wow.
That try to tell us, well, no, we're not that good, or oh, we're not,
Mm,
maybe I shouldn't be talking to people because I'm dying, and what advice do I have? I
wow.
haven't lived enough life. I really hadn't.
Wow.
I haven't done much more than really try and survive the physical stuff that's been in my life.
Wow.
I'm on the other side of that now. So this story still helps and edifying.
Good.
This is who I am.
Good.
And even though all of the health stuff is behind me,
Mm-hmm.
this is something that I can take
Wow.
with me as I move forward.
Well, Barbara, thank you so much for that edification. I mean, I wanted to encourage you and speak into your life and help you. And I'm glad that that has been bearing great fruit in your life. And so I'm just going to, we need to wrap it up right now. But I want to
Okay.
thank you so much for being my guest today and allowing me to introduce you to my audience and for us to share together your legend, the wisdom of the trees. I hope that people who are watching or listening have been encouraged by our conversation and for everything that you had to say, Barbara. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
I enjoyed every moment. Thank you so much for talking with me. I've loved this story.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And we'll have you again later, of course, for Silly Walks and Silly Talks. We'll get that one done too. So, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today on Legends of the Wind. Barbara, thank you for being our guest. And until the next time, we'll see you soon. Thank you. Thanks for joining us today on the Legends of the Wind podcast. Be sure to subscribe, like, and hit the bell button to be alerted of future episodes. And don't forget, our stories are found here in life and beyond the imagination. Now you can finish your story. Keep dreaming, keep believing, and we'll see you again on our next episode of Legends of the Wind. Audiobooks and merchandise are available at legendsofthewind.com. Go and check it out.